Yes, good evening, friends. Welcome to Vijay Mohan IAS Academy, and this is Vijay Mohan. Okay, as far as TSPSC Group 1 examination is concerned, it seems that one way or the other there will be notifications, whether it will be in short term or whether it will be a little bit more, they will take a little bit more time. The issue that there will be some notifications, especially Group 1 as far as TSPSC is concerned, and as far as APPSC is concerned, there is some movement in APPSC also, and recently the commission has announced that there will be notifications with more posts, and they expressed that they want to include more posts in Group 1 and Group 2. So today's lecture is about TSPSC Group 1 Mains Paper 4, that is Indian Economy and Telangana Economy. And as a long-term perspective, as a long-term preparation, as a plan for the long-term preparation, I'll be discussing today about the introduction and approach of the first 5 chapters of the paper 4, that is Indian Economy and Development. See, TSPSC, if you see the syllabus of the TSPSC Group 1 Mains, the syllabus is divided into 3 parts, that is Indian Economy and Development 5 chapters, Telangana Economy 5 chapters, and Development and Environmental Problems 5 chapters, total 15 chapters. So in this video I'll be discussing about the first 5 chapters, that is Indian Economy and Development, and I'll be giving a bird's eye view. Of what is the syllabus actually says about, and how you need to approach, how to think about the areas in the syllabus, and what is the approach that you have to develop, as part of this preparation. So that is the reason why I used the word approach instead of read. See, if you see the first point, why I used approach instead of read. See, as far as mains examination is concerned, there is no point that how much you read. You should be able to understand the concept, you should be able to remember it, you should be able to write it in the exam in the prescribed time and prescribed space limit. This is the main point. See, so it is no matter that how much material or how much content you will be having. What matters is that you should be able to remember that matter, and you should be able to revise it, and you should be able to recollect it within those time frame, and you have to relevantly write answers to the questions in the given time and space. So that is the crux of the mains preparation. That is the reason why I used word approach instead of read. So you should be able to understand how we need to approach the paper, in what areas we have to concentrate, what is the thinking that you have to develop, what are the areas that you can expect a question, and how the questions will be framed, how you need to write the answer, what about the introduction, what about the conclusion. These things you have to be very particular, and you have to develop it over a period of time. That is the reason why I was in the initial while introducing, I said that considering the long-term perspective of the preparation. So now first point is over, that why I used approach instead of read. Then what role this paper will play in final selection. See, paper 4, if you observe, it is having Indian Economy and Development, Telangana Economy, and Development and Environmental Problems, each having 5 chapters. And this paper will have a large scope or good scope for giving good marks, and in a way it will push the marks of an individual candidate and it will play a big role in the final selection. And now that is the reason why this paper is very important as far as final selection is concerned, because it is having a probability of getting high score, probability of getting good score. And then what is the third point that I want to portray is that connectivity with other papers. For example, with essay paper 1, and paper 2, that is geography, and paper 5, that is science and technology paper. In each and every paper there is a component of economy, there is a component of resource based economy, or there is a component of geographical interrelated issues, and there is a now, because of the inclusion of development and environmental problems, this paper is also having the connectivity with science and technology. And so in this way, this paper is having a, what do you say, interrelated aspect with other papers, so that if you read and develop conceptual clarity in this paper, the topics of in this paper, it will be very useful in your essay writing and other papers also. So these are the three issues that I want to put forward. Then, as I already told you, in this video I'll be discussing about the first 5 chapters of Indian economy and development. I will be giving you a bird's eye view, and I will be going through the brief of what is the syllabus and what are the aspects that you need to focus on, and how you need to approach these components, and what are the previous year questions, TSPSC as well as APPSC. These exams have been recently asked, so that you will be able to have some clarity, some idea about the way that you have to proceed, about the issues that you need to concentrate. So first of all, we will we'll deal with the first chapter. See, this is the first chapter. First chapter is, I'll plainly read the the syllabus given in the document, then we will move forward. So first chapter is about national income, concepts and measurement of national income, nominal and real income, structure and growth of Indian economy, sectoral trends in national income of India. So the first chapter revolves around national income, methods of calculation, problems in the calculation of or measurement of national income, structure and growth of Indian income, and sectoral trends in national income of India. See, if you observe the syllabus of the particular TSPSC Group 1 economy syllabus, particularly first 5 parts, it was a good mixture of both core aspects as well as current aspects. See, if you are strong enough in the core aspects, and if you complement, or if you complement it with current aspects, then your answers will be more effective, more value added. So I'll say that the syllabus of these first 5 chapters, as a whole syllabus of the economy paper is good, but particularly these first 5 chapters, the syllabus is framed in such a way that there will be a good balance of core and current events, or core and current issues. So you need to thorough with the core aspects, as well as you need to beef up, or you need to support your concepts with the current aspects. So as far as your first chapter is concerned, this is more of a core oriented chapter. This is more of a core concepts oriented chapter. First, we will demystify each and every aspect of the first chapter. See national income, concepts and measurement of national income, nominal and real income. So you have to study in this issue. As part of this issue, you have to study what are the concepts of national income, and what are the methods of measurement of national income, and what is the nominal income and real income, what are the differences between these two. So if you see, as far as national income is concerned in India, it is being measured through National System of Accounts, NSA. Now this National System of Accounts, it will be regularly released by Central Statistical Office, CSO, and at present the National System of Accounts, NSA, the series is recently, in 2015, the series has been changed from 2004-5 to 2011 and 12. This was changed. NSA National System of Accounts series has been changed in 2011 and 12. So this is one of the important aspects. As part of this National System of Accounts, which is released by Central Statistic Office, there were some changes which is made by CSO in 2015, and these changes pertain to change in the base year, that is 2011 and 12, and also some of the aspects or some of the methodologies which are being used in National System of Accounts are akin to, that means related to, or in a similar way, which is supported by, or which is in a similar way which was used by the United System of National Accounts, SNA 2008. So this United System of National Accounts 2008 is an international standard, and according to these standards, the National System of Accounts has been changed in 2015 with a base year 2011-12. So in a way, apart from these two changes, these major two changes, National System of Accounts had many changes. It had performed, or it had done many changes. So these changes are very important, and you should be able to know what is the national system of accounts, how it will be calculated, which organization is calculating, what are the important changes it has been. CSO has been brought, Central Statistic Office has been brought in 2015. Maybe there will be tomorrow there will be a question directly on that national system of accounts in 2015 had a far-reaching changes. Delineate the changes which were made in the year 2015 in the national system of accounts. In that way, there will be a question. Maybe there is a probability that there will be a question. And another thing that you need to focus in this area, in this chapter, is that what is the significance of national system of accounts. You need to understand what is the actually significance of calculating national income, what is the significance of national system accounts. See, I will briefly tell you that what is the significance. First, you need to understand how economy is growing. For this, you need to know, or you need to measure the economic growth. And after measuring this economic growth, you need to know which sectors are lagging, which sectors are moving forward, and also from this data it will be provided to decision makers, and it will be useful for policy formation. So all these things have a salience for governance and measuring economic growth of a nation. So that is the significance of national system of accounts. So this significance aspect also you need to concentrate as part of your preparation. And next thing, as I already told you, there was in 2015 Central Statistics Office made some changes to the national system of accounts. So what are those changes which was made in 2015? These are also very important for your preparation. And also you should know about the United Nations System of National Accounts, SNA 2008. What are those, and what are those international standards, and what are the changes that were made in national system of accounts as per the United Nations System of National Accounts. This is also an important aspect that you need to understand. And lastly but not least, that different concepts of national income. You need to know minimum basic definition of all these concepts like GDP, GNP, what is NDP, what is NNP, what is disposable personal income, per capita income. All these things you should be able to understand. That there may be a direct question that you can they'll provide in your question paper, that what is the or define GDP, GNP, what is the difference between GDP and NNP. Like that, there is a probability that they might be asking some question. So moving on. So in this chapter, you also need to concentrate on measurement of national income. See, measurement of national income, and particularly there are three methods to measure the national income. There is value added method, income method, expenditure method. You need to briefly know about how national income will be calculated using these methods, and what are the basic differences between these three methods, and how it will reflect the economic growth or national income of a nation. And applications of these methods, these various methods, you should be able to understand. Then only you will be able to write an answer. Maybe there will be a direct question on probability of asking question about these three methods is more. And one more aspect that you need to concentrate as far as this chapter is concerned is that difficulty of measurement of national income. See, there are some difficulties as far as national income calculation is concerned. For instance, if I say that inadequacy of data, there is no adequate data. Even if data is available, there is a lack of reliability of available data. Data is there, but how much it is reliable, how much it is relevant, this is also an important aspect. Then presence of non-monetized sector. Non-monetized sector means informal sector, means where the transactions are not based on money, where the transactions are not based on the currency. This is also an important detrimental for calculation or measurement of national income. And production for self-consumption. If the production is for self-consumption, then it won't reflect in the market, and as it won't reflect in the market, it won't reflect in the data collected for the measurement of national income. This is also one of the difficulty in measuring national income. Then lack of proper occupational classification. If there is no proper occupational classification, then it will be difficult to gather the data to calculate national income. So these are some of the difficulties for the measurement of national income. This area also you need to concentrate. Then difference between nominal and real income. First of all, you need to understand the concept of nominal and real income. After understanding the essence of nominal and real income, you need to understand what is the significance of both concepts. and you need to understand the difference between them. So as far as nominal and real income is concerned, these are the three areas in which you need to think, or you need to have a perspective about the concept. Then then what is the structure and growth of Indian economy? This aspect is also given clearly in the syllabus. If you see that, the structure and growth of Indian economy, this is also very important, and many of the questions are being asked earlier also. So if you see structure and growth of Indian economy so actually, what is the structure of the Indian economy? Structure of the Indian economy is nothing but what is the composition of different sectors like agriculture, industry and services, as far as income is concerned and employment is concerned, value addition is concerned. So how much the Indian economy is agriculture oriented, industry oriented, service oriented in terms of income and in terms of employment generation, in terms of value addition, in terms of exports. So all these things comes under the part of structure of the Indian economy, and how these components or how these sectors are being grown over the years, recently or post 1991 reforms, pre 1991 reforms. So basically it is concentrating this part, that is structure and growth of Indian economy, is concentrating about how the Indian economy and its constituent parts has transitioned from post independence. So it is basically an organic link that the examiner, the syllabus is expecting the candidates to develop. That is how an agriculture dominated economy has been transitioned to directly to service oriented economy, in a way how it is being transitioned through the years, through the 7 decades. That is the real picture that it wants to portray, or it wants to candidates to develop. So as part of this structure and growth of Indian economy, candidates or aspirants has to understand what is the composition of GDP immediately post independence. So candidates or aspirants should be able to have a perspective on what is the composition of GDP immediately post independence, what is the agriculture contribution, what is the industry contribution, what is the services contribution as far as national income and as far as employment is concerned. And then transition through 7 decades, how transition has been happened through these 7 decades up to, you have to this transition, you have to understand that there is pre 1991 reforms and post 1991 reforms. This is pre and post. And then in 2000s there is also, or 2000, middle of the 2000s, there is also one more, watermark thing, that the Indian economy has achieved some rapid growth towards from the starting of the middle of 2000. So you have to have these periods in the mind, and you have to study it in a periodical sense, so that you will be able to understand the whole concept in a broader way. So transition through several decades, how this transition has happened, how an agriculture dominated economy has been transitioned to service dominated economy, leapfrogging from the agriculture to services sector. Then you need to understand about the change in structural composition. As I already told you, from agriculture to services, it is what is the composition of agriculture to GDP, what is the contribution of agriculture to GDP, what is the contribution of industry to GDP, what is the contribution of services to GDP, at the same time what is the contribution to employment. This is the structural transition. So you need to concentrate on change in the structural composition also. And then what are the causes of rapid increase in tertiary sector? For example, as far as India is concerned, actually it has not transitioned in a traditional sense, that is to say that from agriculture to industry, then to services. Actually Indian economy transitioned directly from agriculture to services. So what are the causes for this transition, and what are the prospects and opportunities? So what are the prospects and opportunities for this because of this transition, and what are the implications because of this transition, and what are the limitations for this type of transition or this type of structural transformation? So this is also one more thing that candidates has to keep in mind. Then sectoral trends in national income of India. So as part of this sectoral trends in national income of India, as I already told you previously that what are the sectoral trends, that how agriculture has been grown, how industry has been grown, how services has been grown, what is the contribution of employment, how employment is decreased or how employment is increased. So this is the sectoral trends in national income of India. As part of this aspect, the aspirants has to concentrate on distribution of GDP between agricultural and non-agricultural income. So what is the distribution of GDP between agricultural and non-agricultural income? And share of organized and unorganized sectors, then share of public and private sectors in the GDP, then growth and occupational structure. Tomorrow there will be a question that please paint the structural transformation of Indian economy as far as income and employment is concerned. There is a probability that question might be in this way, that examiner might ask to paint the structural transformation of the economy as far as economy and employment is concerned. So you have to develop the perspective in this way. Then growth and distribution of income, what is the growth and what is the distribution of income across sectors. Then inequalities in distribution of income in India. So because of this structural transformation, what is the inequality, what is the inequalities developed in distribution of income in India, what is the what is the transition of Gini coefficient. And now recently there were some Oxfam reports regarding inequality. You need to connect this inequality to the structural transformation of Indian economy. So these are the perspectives that you need to develop in order to answer the questions which will come from this chapter. So if, for example, if you see the previous year questions as far as from this chapter is concerned, you just see the first question. These are some of the questions which were asked. Discuss the nature of sectoral contribution of income to national income of India since independence. Also, this is national income of India. Okay, also examine whether the changes in sectoral contribution to national income of India followed Kuznets clock hypothesis. This question was asked in APPSC 2017. So basically it is a direct question as far as first part is concerned. It was asking about the nature of sectoral contribution of income to the national income. You have to see that sectoral contribution of income, it is asking about the sectoral contribution of income, not about employment. So you need to concentrate on your answer on sectoral contribution of income to the national income of India since independence. The time period is since independence. And it is asking whether also examine whether the changes in sectoral contribution to national income of India followed Kuznets clock hypothesis. See, for this question I'll give you a brief idea about how to write these type of answers or how to approach these type of questions. Sectoral contribution of income as far as agriculture, industry and services is concerned, immediately post independence in 1950, 60% of GDP is from agriculture, 13% is from industry and 27% is from services. If you compare these sectoral contributions with 2019-20 data, and which is given in the percentage in GVA, 17% GVA is from nearly approximately from agriculture and 25% is from industry and 54% is from services. If you see the services contribution, it has increased rapidly from 27% to 54%. At the same time, agricultural contribution has decreased rapidly from 60% to 17%. So this is the kind of structural transformation that India has been experienced over the 7 decades. And if you see the second part, which is a complex thing as far as this question is concerned, also examine whether the changes in sectoral contribution to national income of India followed Kuznets clock hypothesis. This is a tricky part. Just see, what is the Kuznets hypothesis? Kuznets hypothesis is a relation between income per capita and inequality levels. It says that the Kuznets hypothesis says that as far as economies are concerned, increase in income levels or increase in income per capita first will increase the inequality up to a certain level, After certain level, increase in income, it will decrease the inequality in the economy. So this is the Kuznets hypothesis, and because of this initial increase, then reaching a plateau and decreasing the inequality along with the income per capita, the Kuznets curve will be like inverted U. So this is the Kuznets hypothesis. It is, and as far as India's experience is concerned, India's experience confirms the Kuznets hypothesis. That means to say that fall in agriculture share of employment, that is income, agriculture share of employment or income, and rise in non-agricultural employment leads to higher level of inequality. So what he is trying to say is that there is an increase in the non-agricultural employment or non-agricultural income when compared to agricultural income, and because of this increase in income per capita, there is a higher level of inequality in the first instance. So as far as this aspect is concerned, India's experience confirms the Kuznets hypothesis. However, the relationship is non-linear. Why it is a non-linear? Because there is a higher level of structural transformation out of agriculture directly to services. Because of this non-linear relationship, there is a sharper rise in inequality as far as India is concerned. So in a way, the structural transformation or sectoral contribution of in a way, the changes in sectoral contribution to national income of India will confirms the Kuznets hypothesis in a limited manner. Because there is a non-linear relationship because why it is in limited manner, it confirmed in a limited manner because there is a non-linear relationship because of the higher level of structural transformation out of agriculture to services, and because of this there is a sharper rise in inequality. So basically this is the issue, and this is how you need to approach this type of question. I'm just giving a broad idea about these type of questions. Then if you see the other question which was asked on the issues related to this chapter, second question is explain the problems in measuring national income. So this is a direct question. It is saying that you need to explain the problems in measuring the national income. It is asked in APPSC 2008 Group 1 Mains examination. This is some sort of direct question, that what are the problems in measuring national income, which I have already told you previously. So you will get some idea about this one. So this is the first chapter. So I hope you will be having a fair idea about the first chapter. Now see the second chapter. I'll move a little bit quickly so that I'll be able to complete all the 5 chapters. Now if you see the second chapter, it is about the poverty and unemployment and concepts of poverty, that is income based and non-income based poverty, capability approach, which is related to Amartya Sen, and which is again related to human poverty index, then measurement of poverty and trends in poverty, concepts, estimates and trends of unemployment. This is basically about the poverty and unemployment chapter. So if you take the first aspect, poverty and unemployment, concepts of poverty. First, if you have to take poverty, then what are the concepts of poverty and income? What is the income based poverty, non-income based poverty, capability approach, human poverty index? This is the first area. See how you have to approach this chapter, I'll tell you. So first you need to concentrate on the conceptual understanding, that is poverty definition. What is poverty and what is the definition of poverty line, and what is the evolution of poverty line? So evolution of poverty line concept, and different committees. What are the committees and what are their recommendations? How, since post independence, how poverty has been calculated? What are the methods? What are the different committees? What are their what are their recommendations? For example, there were many committees like Planning Commission Working Group, then Lakdawala Committee, then Suresh Tendulkar Committee, then recently Rangarajan Committee. Everybody has given a lot of recommendations which are diversified, and there was some calorie based measurement of the poverty, there was some income based measurement of poverty, there were some broader concepts of welfare mechanisms or welfare things which were included in the calculation of poverty line. These things you should be able to have a fair understanding, and you should be able to prepare some sort of basic notes so that you will be able to remember them, revise them, and you will be able to reproduce them in the actual exam. So if you take that income based poverty, so how you need to approach this income based poverty? What is the significance of this income based poverty, and what are the methods for calculation of this income based poverty, and what are the limitations in this income based poverty? Then comes the non-income based poverty. See, this non-income based poverty is actually a broader concept which is very much related to capability approach. And this capability approach is portrayed or put forward by Amartya Sen, and you need to understand that I made it here separately. So capability approach, this is very important, that's why I made it separate. So what is a capability approach? So in capability approach, which is put forward by the Amartya Sen, it is a broader concept, and it has changed the dynamics of measuring the welfare or development of people and nations. So basically, what is the capability approach? See, in simple words, capability approach is nothing but the people's capability, the people's choice, the people's freedom. These will decide the development path or development level of an economy or people, because each and every person is different in his capability, in his actions, in his functioning. So if a person is capable to use his resources and achieve his goals and improve his choices and capabilities, that is the main aspect of development. And in this capability approach, there are three main aspects. First one is functionings, capabilities, and agency. And another thing is that in capability approach, freedoms, choice, and capabilities are important, and these three will be taken into consideration for measuring the development. And income, expenditure, consumption, wealth, all these things are just means to an end, that is development. So income, if you measure income, if you measure expenditure, if you measure consumption, if you measure wealth, it is not sufficient. You need to measure the freedom, you need to measure the capability of each person to better his own life, you need to measure the choice that persons are having. Then only you will be able to know what is the real development that people or individual or nations have been achieved. And Amartya Sen often used to cite Karl Marx that replacement of domination of circumstances and chance and on individuals to domination of individuals on circumstances and chance. If you read it clearly, it shows that there must not be a domination of circumstances and chance on individuals. There should be a domination of individuals on circumstances and chance. It means to say that the people should have control over their lives, the people should have control over their choices, the people should have control over their capabilities. That is what the capability approach is all about. And it is a what is a watermark philosophy or watermark econometric theory, that it has changed the perspective of the welfare or measurement of the national wealth or measurement of the development of a nation as such. So this is the perspective that you need to understand about the capability approach. I am limiting it very broadly so that I will be able to complete all the 5 chapters. So so non-income poverty, you have to understand the capability approach, that is, and which is related to human poverty index, and what is the context of this capability or non-income based poverty or capability approach. What is the necessity? Already we are having a lot of measurements, human development index, and human development index, some reports or measurements. So what is the necessity of this capability approach, and what are the dimensions of this capability approach, what are the methods of measurement of this capability approach, and any case studies are there, and what are the limitations again you are having on the capability approach which related to the capability approach. So these are the things you need to able to understand. And measurements of poverty and trends in poverty, as I already told you that you need to have a perspective about the measurements of poverty, different measurements of poverty, and about the recommendations of different committees. Then you need to understand you need to have a perspective about the trends in poverty, how before post 1991 reforms, how poverty has been reduced or increased, or after 1991 reforms, what is the effect of poverty, or how poverty has been reduced or improved. So, and whether poverty has been changed from rural area to urban areas. Recently there was one report, I don't remember particularly, that report has said that in poverty in India has been metamorphosed from being a rural oriented to urban oriented. Those things that you need to follow the trend. And what are the effects of LPG, over poverty and poverty trends, these also you need to have a perspective. And if you come to employment, same thing you have to follow in employment also, that What is the nature of employment in Indian economy since since independence? And there was a ruralization, for example. There was informalization of employment. There was casualization of employment, and there was masculinization of employment. Masculinization means there was more unemployment in what do you say, in women, as far as when you compared with men are concerned. Means men are more employed when compared to women. And that is the reason why there is a less labor force participation rate, less women work participation rate in Indian economy. That is the reason why I used word masculinization of employment. This is also you need to understand what is the nature of employment in India since independence. Then types of unemployment. What are the types of unemployment? Cyclical, frictional, seasonal. These things disguise unemployment. Maybe tomorrow there will be a direct question on what are the types of unemployment very much predominant in India. Explain in simple words, they may ask. Then estimates are methods of unemployment, measuring unemployment. So there are three methods, like weekly method, daily method, and usual method. These three methods you need to understand, and you should have a little bit perspective, little bit content on these things, so that there may be you will be able to write answers when the question was asked in this. And trends, you need to understand the trends: temporal trends, sectoral trends, and spatial trends. That means temporal means during the time periods. For instance, pre 1991 levels, post 1991 levels. Sectoral levels, like you mean to say formal sectors or informal sectors, or in agriculture or industry or services. What is the unemployment scenario? What is the employment scenario? Spatial, you mean to say what is the unemployment trends in North India, or some pockets of some states of North India and South India. So like this, you need to have a perspective on the unemployment and reasons for unemployment. What are the reasons for the unemployment in India, and what are the consequences of this unemployment in India, and what are the efforts to increase employment opportunities in India? What are the schemes, Make in India scheme or skill development scheme? Now recently one important scheme is related to what do you say, production linked incentive scheme and MG Narega scheme. All these important schemes you need to make a small notes. Capability approach, I already told you. Now if you see the previous questions which were asked from this chapter, so I will read out. So give an account of the objectives of Prime Minister Employment Generation Program PMEGP and benefits received under this scheme. This was asked in APPSC 2020. This is a direct question. Then explain the possible limitations in the strategy of poverty alleviation adopted by the Government of India. So it is asking about the limitations for poverty alleviation program, limitations in poverty alleviation strategy. It is asked in APPSC 2016. Then explain the methods of measuring unemployment in India. This is also a direct question. It is asking about the methods of measuring unemployment in India, and it was asked in APPSC 2008. So these are some of the previous questions to give you some idea about in which areas the question, the probability of questions being asked. Next, if you see money and banking. Sorry. So money and banking, this chapter I'll read out the chapter: money supply, structure of Indian banking and non-banking financial institutions, reforms in banking sector, regulation of credit by Reserve Bank of India. This is the basic syllabus. Now money supply. So what is the areas that you need to concentrate as far as this issue is concerned? What is the context of money supply, and what is the money or credit creation process? What are the functions and significance of money, and what are the kinds of money? And if you see money supply in India, how money supply in India is being controlled, and that conceptual understanding you need to have. Then measures of money supply. What are the important measures of money supply? And there are 4 measures of money supply in India. That is M1, M2, M3 and M4. And one more thing, high powered money, which is a total liability of Reserve Bank of India. Then there is a possibility tomorrow that there will be a question on what is the high powered money. Explain. They can ask. So this is the thing that you need to have an idea. Then what are the factors affecting money supply in India? Explain the factors which affect the money supply in India. There is a possibility that type of questions will be asked. And there are basically 2 factors that affect the money supply in India. That is the currency deposit ratio CDR and the reserve deposit ratio RDR. These are the 2 aspects that will control the money supply of India. So as far as this money supply is concerned, these are the areas that you need to have a idea or have a perspective. Then what is the structure of Indian banking and non-banking financial institutions? So as far as this aspect is concerned, you need to have an idea about the basic classification of the banks. For example, as far as basic classification is concerned, now Indian banks are classified as regional rural banks, RRBs, cooperative banks, and commercial banks. There is another classification, that is scheduled and non-scheduled banks. And you need to understand that as far as Indian banking is concerned, there are a lot of things going on as far as NPS, non-performing assets, are concerned, and RBI's efforts towards non-performing assets and government's efforts towards non-performing assets, and also bank capitalization or recapitalization is happening. There are some large debates about the requirement or the necessity of recapitalization of banks with the public money. So those debates also you need to understand, and you need to understand what are the reasons for increased NPS. Then IBC resolution process through IBC, and how IBC is being done, what are the success or limitations, and what are the amendments. So all these things you need to understand as far as Indian banking is concerned. And if you see the non-banking financial companies, you need to know actually what is NBFC, what is the definitional aspects, why NBFC is required. There are banks are there in Indian economy. Instead of that, why non-banking financial companies are needed? Then what is the basic difference between banks and NBFCs? Then there might be a question on the what is the difference between banks and NBFCs. Then what is the regulation aspects of NBFC, and what about the Usha Thorat committee about the NBFC, what are its recommendations and texts and steps, and what are the recommendations of the Usha Thorat committee, and what are the steps taken by the RBI regarding the NBFCs. So these are all things you need to understand. You need to have a perspective. As far as NBFC is concerned, RBI now regulatory environment has been slowly defined, and RBI has taken several measures. So you need to just go through those things and make a notes of it, so that you will be able to know the regulatory environment of NBFCs and the significance of NBFCs in the Indian economy. Then reforms in banking sector. What is the context of reforms, and what is the historical necessity of these reforms? You need to have a perspective. And then you need to understand the Narasimham Committee, first Narasimham Committee in 1991, then Narasimham Committee 2, and what are the important recommendations of these two committees. Then what is the significance of these reforms, and reforms still to be done. What are the reforms that we need now, and that we need from now onwards, and what are the important things that had to be done in the banking sector? These are the things that you need to understand in this chapter. And as far as regulation of credit by Reserve Bank of India is concerned, you can study, or I'll tell you this in the chapter 4. Okay. So what are the some of the questions which are being asked from this chapter? The first question is that the central bank autonomy is important for conducting a consistent monetary policy. Comment. This was asked in APPSC 2016, and it is asking about the autonomy of the central bank for conducting a consistent monetary policy. There was a discussion at that point of time that central bank of autonomy of the central bank has to be increased, so that it doesn't comes under the pressure of the government to implement monetary policy more freely. So in that context, this question has been put up. And then state the measures which are initiated by the Reserve Bank of India to regulate credit disbursed by the non-banking financial institutions. It was asked in APPSC 2012. So it is basically a direct question, and it is asking that what are the measures which are initiated by RBI to regulate the credit which is disbursed by the NBFCs. I already told you that regulatory environment of NBFCs and NBFC significance for Indian economy. These two aspects are very important as far as NBFCs are concerned. Okay. So if you go to fourth chapter is about public finance. I'll read out the syllabus. Tax structure, central and state taxes, government expenditure in revenue and capital account, and public debt composition, that is internal and external debt, monetary policy, fiscal policy, union budget analysis. This is in effect total chapter related to public finance. So as far as this chapter is concerned, if you take public finance, tax structure, central and state taxes, so you need to understand the constituent parts, that is what are the taxes, what are the direct and indirect taxes. And with the introduction of GST, then the indirect taxes, mostly all indirect taxes has been subsumed into GST. So GST will become important as far as this chapter is concerned. Apart from that, you need to understand the basic tax structure and what are the constituent parts of this tax structure of center and state. So apart from this, now we have to understand the GST. So what is the historical evolution? What is the rationale for bringing the GST? What are the main provisions of GST? What are the developments so far? How far it has been succeeded? How far? What are the limitations? And what are the contentious issues like compensation issue to states, or exclusion of certain products from the GST ambit, or fiscal federalism aspect? All these things you need to understand as far as GST concerned. Maybe because there is a high probability that coming exam there will be a question on GST, and they may be asked that GST, what is the significance of GST, how far GST has been succeeded in its objectives. They might directly pose a question, and you need to follow the trends of GST collections, how much it is being collected, what is the collections pre-pandemic, what is the collections post-pandemic, what are the trends, how it is being useful. So these things you need to understand as far as tax structure is concerned and GST is concerned. And next aspect is about government expenditure in revenue and capital account. So you need to, as far as this aspect is concerned, you need to have a conceptual understanding about the revenue and capital account, and what are the historical trends as far as expenditure in revenue and capital account are concerned, and what is the significance of this expenditure in revenue and capital account, which one is weighing more and which one is being given more important, why revenue account, expenditure in revenue account is important as far as a developing economy like India is concerned, and why capital account has to be a sustainable one. These things you need to have some idea. And now the important aspect is public debt. Many questions have been asked in as far as public debt is concerned. So you have to be thorough with the public debt aspect. If you see public debt, there is a question in the syllabus itself, they have given that composition, that is internal debt and external debt. So you need to understand the basic concept of public debt, and what is the trend of public debt last 1 decade or 2 decades, and what are the major components, and whether the public debt, what is the component of long term, what is the long term component, and what is the short term component, what is the sustainability levels of the public debt. So these things you need to understand. And why public debt is very important is that recently in economic survey also there is one whole chapter as far as sustainability of public, recently in economic survey also there is one whole chapter as far as public debt is concerned, and the chapter is about sustainability of public debt. So in a way public debt is a very important aspect, and you need to follow the trends of the public debt. What is the public debt, whether it is increasing or decreasing, what is the internal component of the public debt, whether it is increasing, decreasing, what is the external debt component of the public debt, and what are the maturity profile of the public debt. Maturity profile. So how the maturity profile of public debt, Indian public debt, has been behaving. And for this you need to refer some of the authenticated sources are there. For example, you can have RBI reports, and some of the government reports are there. For example, the status paper on government debt by Department of Economic Affairs. This is a good source document as far as public debt is concerned. And as I already told you, Economic Survey 2021, a separate chapter on debt sustainability aspect is there. So these things that you need to understand as far as public debt is concerned. Now the monetary and fiscal policies, these are somewhat direct policies, and many questions are being asked on these policies. So what is the monetary policy and what is the fiscal policy? What are their objectives, basic objectives, and what is the functioning mechanism? You need to understand that monetary policy, there were many changes in recent years as far as RBI is concerned, how RBI Monetary Policy Committee works, who are the members of the Monetary Policy Committee, and there was some targets as far as inflation targeting is concerned. So there are so many things happened in these years as far as monetary policy is concerned. And there were discussion about the transmission or transition of monetary policy changes. There was a criticism that the monetary effects of the monetary policy or decisions of the monetary policy are not being transitioned to the end consumer because of the reluctance of the banks, or because of some limitations in implementation. These things also you need to navigate. You need to have a understanding about this monetary policy, and what are the effects of these monetary and fiscal policies. What are the special mechanisms? As I already told you, Monetary Policy Committee, how it came into picture, and who are the members, and how what is the procedure for this inflation targeting or monetary policy or fiscal consolidation roadmap. So fiscal consolidation roadmap is also very important, and related to this FRBM Act and recent amendment, this is also very important as far as monetary and fiscal policies are concerned. And then comparative perspective, we need to compare that what is the situation before, what is the situation now, how we have been improving, how we can improve. So these are the things that you need to concentrate as far as monetary and fiscal policies are concerned. There were many questions asked on these aspects. Then union budget and budget analysis, structure of the as part of this thing, you need to understand what is the structure of government budget and what are its components, what is the budgeting process, what are the recent changes. For instance, if you say merger of railway budget with the main budget and budget process starting early, these are the recent changes, and highlights of the current year's union budget and its analysis. So for example, you have to list down the positive aspects, have a critical view also, and keep a note on the deficits and debts because it is important. Then make a note of important policy announcements as far as union budget is concerned. Sometimes they will directly pick up a sentence or they will directly pick up a program from the union budget and they will ask to elaborate on this issue or explain on this issue. So these things you should have a perspective. Then if you see the previous questions from these topics, define public debt. See, directly they have asked define public debt and give its components with reference to Indian government. What are its components with reference to Indian government, and explain the trends in public debt since 2010 onwards. They have given for 10 years and it is being asked in APPSC 2020 exam. If you see another question, the central bank autonomy is important for conducting a consistent monetary policy commit. Again, APPSC 2016, it was given that the central bank autonomy is an important aspect for conducting a consistent monetary policy. So it is revolving around the monetary policy, fiscal policy, public debt, trends in public debt. So these are the things that you need to concentrate as far as this chapter is concerned. Now I'll finish it off very quickly, the fifth chapter. So fifth chapter is about planning in Indian economy, objectives, priorities, strategies, achievements of 5-year plans, 12th 5-year plan, inclusive growth, Niti Aayog, LPG, its features and implications. It is more of a direct chapter, and if you see the first aspect, planning in Indian economy, objectives, priorities, strategies, achievements of 5 plans. It is a self-explanatory. What are the objectives? Here, see, you don't need to note down all the objectives of all the plans or all the priorities of all the plans or all the achievements of all the plans. You need to have a broader perspective. What are the broader objectives of all the plans? What are the priorities of all the plans? What are the strategies and what are the achievements of all the 5-year plans? There is a broad, see, every individual 5-year plan has its own objectives or priorities, but nevertheless there is a common thread in Indian 5-year plans that commonly we have pursued through 5-year plans some objectives, some priorities, some achievements. So some limitations were also there. So as a broader aspect, you just develop or you just have a notes on the broader objectives or priorities of the 5-year plans. Now just concentrate more on 12th 5-year plan and inclusive growth. 12th 5-year plan talks about sustainable and inclusive growth. So what is the context? What are the objectives? What is the significance and strategies? And what is inclusive growth? Why inclusive growth came into picture? Because trickle down theory has been failed. That's why inclusive growth came into picture. And what is the inequality and exclusion? Because of the inequality and exclusion increased, we are talking about inclusive growth. And the policy talks about the 12th 5-year plan, talks about the inclusivity and sustainability aspect. What is this inclusivity and sustainability aspect? And what is the distributive justice it wanted to achieve? And through this, what is the aspect of wealth creation? What is the issue of virtual cycle? And as PM is telling again and again, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas and Sabka Prayas. And through this, there is a connectivity to Atmanirbhar Bharat. These are the new things, that is Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas and Sabka Prayas and Atmanirbhar Bharat and virtuous cycle of growth and wealth creation. These two things, virtuous cycle of growth and wealth creation, were put forward in the recent economic surveys of last 2 or 3 years. So these are the new things that you need to study in compliance or along with the inclusive growth and sustainability component. So these are the aspects that you need to concentrate as far as this issue is concerned. And as far as Niti Aayog is concerned, what is the contextual background? What is the necessity? And what is the structure and principles of Niti Aayog? tomorrow there is every possibility that there might be a question that Niti Aayog, what are the structure and principles of Niti Aayog, how it is being contributed to the cooperative federalism. So this aspect is also very important. So what is the comparative perspective between the Planning Commission and Niti Aayog, and what is the significance to cooperative federalism, and what are the achievements and what are the limitations and challenges for this Niti Aayog. So as far as Niti Aayog is concerned, you have to dissect this in this manner, and you have to prepare some sort of short notes in this way. So this is the thing as far as 5th chapter is concerned. And one more thing in the 5th chapter, LPG, liberalization, privatization, globalization, and its features and implications. See, in this chapter you need to have a fair idea about what is liberalization, what is privatization, and what is globalization. See, these three things nowadays excuse me, yeah, sorry. So you need to understand the context. What are the prevailing conditions before the implementation of LPG? What is the necessity of implementing this LPG, and what are the measures as part of LPG the government has been introduced, and what is the conceptual understanding of LPG? See, in LPG you need to have a fair clear idea of what is liberalization, what is privatization, what is globalization. You could actually in policy parlance, or actually they are using liberalization, privatization interchangeably, but it is not similar. They are very different in a manner, they are very different conceptually. So you should be able to understand what is the liberalization, what are the measures that have been taken under the liberalization, what is the privatization, what are the measures that have been taken under privatization, what is the globalization. So features of each with examples you should be able to know, and measures that were taken. Actually, as part of the LPG, two types of measures were taken. One is stabilization measures and another is structural measures. Stabilization measure is immediate measures, structural measures is long-term measures. These things you should be able to understand. Then implications. What are the implications? What are the positive implications and what are the negative implications? What are the implications on agriculture? What are the implications on industry and services? What are the implications on investment? And what are the implications on foreign exchange reserves? So these things you need to have a perspective. And there were many questions on the LPG and its effects. So recent trends also you need to understand. Protectionism tendencies are there, trade wars are also happening, deglobalization is also happening now. Then commentary on the globalization versus Make in India or Atmanirbhar Bharat or Vocal for Local, this discourse also you need to follow. So these are the issues that you have to concentrate as far as 5th chapter is concerned. Now if you observe the previous year questions from this chapter, you just see critically appraise the objectives and major achievements in Indian economy during the planning era during 1950 to 1991. This is asking TSPSC 2016. This is a direct question. It is asking about the objectives during the planning era and major achievements in the planning era, that is up to 1950 1991. These are the type of the questions that there will be asked in this chapter. Then another question is that explain the specific problems which are encountered by Indian economy with increasing share of private sector in the context of globalization. This is asking APPSC 2012. The question is basically asking about in the context of globalization, there is an increased participation and increased share of private sector in the Indian economy, and what are the specific problems that are being encountered because of this private sector participation in the Indian economy. These things he is asking. So these are the type of questions that you may encounter in the coming exams also. So these are the 5 chapters, and this is the basic bird's eye view of the first 5 chapters of the Indian economy. So friends, so this is the thing about the first 5 chapters. In the coming classes I'll take up the just give me some time. So in the next class I'll take up the development and environmental problems, that is the last 5 chapters. I'll be giving a bird's eye view, and I will be telling you how to approach these last 5 chapters. And next I will take the Telangana economy, middle 5 chapters related to the Telangana economy, so that I'll be able to give you a bird's eye view, or I'll be able to give you a basic perspective about all these chapters. So my next video will be on development and environment problems, last 5 chapters. So this is the thing, and sorry. So as far as economy paper is concerned, in TSPSC group 1, this paper will give you a good dividends, provided that you concentrate it and you have some long-term plan and you have some long-term perspective, and you should be able to prepare some notes on each and every topic, and you should be able to revise them regularly, and you should be able to write the answers repeatedly. Then only you will be able to score maximum marks in this paper, and this paper will be very useful for your preparation in another papers also. And this is a kind of paper that you need to put up lot of effort. It doesn't come to you in a day, and you have to supplement this preparation, your preparation, with newspapers, important articles in newspapers, editorials, so you can follow them and you can add your current events to your core concepts. Then only you will be able to score good marks as far as economy paper is concerned. Okay.